Hello everyone and welcome to this first Re.green Talks, the videocast and podcast of the most innovative forest restoration company. I'm Adolgisa Pires and with me, Thiago Picolo, co-CEO of regreen, and Bernardo Strassburg, co-CEO and founder of regreen. Thiago is an experienced executive and business manager, having worked in areas like technology and food retail. And Bernardo is a renowned researcher in the science of sustainability, having already published dozens of articles in scientific journals around the world. Well, today we are going to talk about what is most advanced in forest restoration and carbon credits, two contemporary and such important issues. Bernardo, tell us what restoring a forest means and how science approaches this concept.
Restoring a forest or any ecosystem is to bring back the original composition, the original structure, and the original ecosystem processes that were originally present before human disturbance. That disturbance sometimes is a degradation of a forest, but usually is also a complete deforestation. Scientific approaches to it have proven over and over again that we are now able to restore that same quality, those same processes, if we follow carefully all the prescriptions provided by science. regreen's founders and co-founders and our team has a long track record in innovation in this particular field. That originally is why we decided to found and develop regreen, is to bring all the technical, the scientific, and the practical knowledge into something that would be able to reach the scales that the global problems we face demand.
Very interesting, this grounding in science and nature, but how did this activity become a profitable business and at the same time so necessary for humanity?
Well, it starts with the size of the climate challenge that we have ahead of us now. The world emits about 59 gigatons of CO2 every year, and in order for us to limit the increase in the global temperature, we need to cut that down to zero. We need to get to net zero, and we need to do it relatively fast by 2050. Now, there are many ways of doing that. Certainly, the world needs to work very hard to reduce emissions, be it in energy, in transportation, in manufacturing, in agriculture. But there will be a point where we will need to offset any remaining emissions with carbon credits, with activities that generate the capture of carbon and get us to net zero, where cutting down emissions won't be enough. So that's the need there. You have a need for offsets. A few years ago, you started to see a bigger participation from corporates, companies stepping up and assuming pledges to reduce or to cut down their emissions and to reach net zero within certain dates. So this also created demand coming from corporates. And I think to top all of that, I think there's been a lot of advancement in the world in the science of restoration, be it in understanding where to restore in order to optimize the benefits for climate, for biodiversity, for communities, be it in the restoration methodologies themselves, which are now more proven, better developed, and should result in outcomes that are better for the environment.
Along these lines, Thiago, what kind of customers will regreen serve? What does demand come from for what regreen produces and offers to the market?
So initially, our target customers are large corporates that emit CO2 in their activities, be it in their core activities or in their supply chain, and that are committed to reaching net zero. These companies will do everything they can in order to emit less in their own activities, and they'll look to us and other carbon offset providers in order to reach zero and compensate whatever residual emissions they're not able to cut down. These are companies that generally have a strong commitment, often a commitment that comes from their shareholders, from their customers, from the media, from society, And therefore, they look for credits which deliver a high quality carbon capture, a carbon capture which is clearly additional, which is clearly measurable, which is permanent, which is resilient, and also that generates benefits to the communities that are around the project areas, to the biodiversity as well.
Okay, so Bernardo, a lot is said about re.green standard. So can you explain, please, how this expression came about and what it is based on?
When we created the expression of the regreen standard, it's because it's still very hard to differentiate quality in the market we operate. So the Society for Ecological Restoration classifies restorations on anything between 1 and a 5-star ecological restoration. Regreen only focus on the top quality of restoration. So from the point of view of ecology, we will only be producing what the society calls the 5-star ecological restoration. But the regreen standards go beyond that. We, in addition to ecological excellence, we also aim to deliver impact for people. We also aim to deliver enhanced impact for climate, for biodiversity. But regreening is also born out of the ambition to show that we can do that while creating value for the economy, for the stakeholders, for the local community. So impact is very important, but the transformational scales that we need to achieve would only be feasible through an approach that also creates values to investors, to stakeholders. So the regreen standard is a combination of excellence in the techniques based on science, but also excellence in impact and in business development.
How are all these related with this history of Bioflora, the nursery of seeds, which regreen incorporated?
They are intrinsically linked. So Bioflora was created by our co-founder, Ricardo Rodrigues, a professor at the University of São Paulo, and has long been recognized as the premier tree nursery in the Atlantic forest. So, and that recognition of quality comes from the diversity of native species that it produces, but also through something that is really important for us, which is Bioflora history in capacity building of other tree nurseries. Because for us, it's absolutely crucial that we will develop the local capacity in the regions we will implement restoration. So part of our impact strategy is to enable the local community to thrive through new business. So in that sense, Bioflora history of both producing high quality trees, but also helping local communities to develop is crucial to our expansion business model.
Thiago, are these points that Bernardo brings up the ideas that give regreen's carbon credit a special status?
So, we operate within what are called the nature-based solutions for carbon capture. And within the nature-based solutions, there's a whole spectrum, and we're positioned at the very high end of the spectrum for exactly the reasons he just mentioned. I think the first one that we need to talk about is additionality. We're talking about restoring a native ecosystem that was cut down decades, sometimes even centuries ago. So the additional aspect of that carbon capture is unquestionable. The second thing we need to talk about when we talk about quality and value is permanence. We're talking about not planting trees, but rather restoring a whole ecosystem, not only in its functional composition, but all its processes as well. So you have much more resilience in that system, much more of a guarantee that that system will be maintained in the long term. I think you also need to talk about co-benefits, and this is something that we're very passionate about and have a very high criteria in putting together our projects. I think one specific aspect is biodiversity. It's an area that's very dear to us, and that's actually the area of research of many of our founders and partners. And it's ensuring that we're restoring the area and promoting an increase in biodiversity. For example, by ensuring that we have a decrease in the risk of extinction of certain species, and making sure that we place the restoration in areas where that impact can be the greatest. For example, connecting two fragments and creating a corridor that can be helpful for the development of certain species. I think another aspect that also adds a lot of value to the projects is the social aspect, is ensuring that the communities around the project area are involved in an integral way in the project, in the design phase, in the implementation phase, and that they also benefit from the project. So just to give an example, or two examples in fact, one area where we have a lot of involvement from the community is in the production of tree seedlings and the collection of seeds. We are now starting the first restorations in the south of Bahia, and we have 5 partner tree nurseries that are producing seedlings for this restoration, following guidelines that we gave them and quality standards that we gave them, and generating jobs in the area. There are other examples as well that I can go into, such as the involvement of local labor in the restoration, such as making available to the community areas in which they can practice agroforestry. And we ensure that this is all very well monitored and very well designed in order to generate the highest quality credit possible.
What can the world expect from such a Brazilian tropical solution? Will this be a paradigm shift on the world stage?
We definitely hope so, because Brazil has the natural potential to be a global leader in this space. In a previous research we've done, published in the journal Science, we identified the global priority areas for restoration. And no country has as many priority areas as Brazil. So we definitely hope to show the world how a tropical technology and tropical science can be a key part of a global challenge. And in time, we hope to be taking these Brazilian solutions to other countries to achieve the really planetary scale solutions we need.
Let's talk about the Oro Verde project. How is it related to this very beginning of the construction of regreen standard?
It's intrinsically related, because in the Oro Verde project we'll be putting in practice all the elements we discussed before. So it is based in science, in technology. It aims to achieve a 5-star ecological restoration, and something that is very dear to us is the location where Oro Verde is. Oro Verde is a farm in the so-called Discovery Coast in Bahia, where Europeans first arrived. And in this very area where exploitation of Brazilian natural resources began, and definitely through a very poor relation with the indigenous people 522 years ago, we are now going back and hand in hand with the local indigenous people who run a tree nursery from which we'll be receiving species native to the Atlantic forest, native to the Discovery Coast. We'll be restoring those areas back to the original condition they have before Europeans arrive. So for us, this is the embodiment of what regreen means: working with the indigenous people, working with the local communities, and bringing back a 5-star ecological restoration through a value-creating exercise, showing that perhaps we can now establish in Brazil an economy based on restoring nature instead of exploiting it.
So Oro Verde is the first area that we're restoring, is the first property that we're restoring, and it's very symbolic for us for many aspects. It's inserted within the south of Bahia in the Atlantic forest, which is a biome of huge importance to Brazil and to the world, and that unfortunately has been severely cut down and degraded over centuries. So we have something like 20% of the Atlantic forest left, and the fact that we're contributing to bringing that back is a great source of pride for us, and I think it speaks in a very aligned way to the purpose of our company. In addition to that, this is an area which has a lot of unproductive cattle ranches, extensive cattle ranching, an activity that generates very little return and very little benefit to the community. So for us to be able to do a restoration in this area, to employ the community and to generate benefits is a great pleasure.
How do you see the carbon credits market in 5 years' time?
I think definitely bigger. I think there is a great momentum as it relates to carbon credits, and specifically as it relates to restoration as well. You see a lot of companies engaged in buying credits and promoting the generation of these credits, and we want to be a leader in this field. So I do think it's going to be a bigger market. I do think there will be more companies as well acting within this market. I would like to think that we would see also a market with a higher level of quality. I think carbon has been around, carbon credits have been around for decades, something like 20 years, and you've had good actors, good projects, bad projects, and we have a big interest in ensuring that this market develops with a high standard level, with clear additionality, with a focus on permanence, with clear co-benefits to biodiversity and to the communities. So I also think that we'll see a market that's has more integrity, has more quality, and more transparency.
Bernardo.
I fully agree with Thiago, and I think in a few years what we're expecting to see is that the nature-based solution part of the carbon market also includes aspects related to restoration and many other ecosystem services in a much more active and prominent way. And re.green is actually at the forefront on measuring, planning, and implementing for these other benefits. So there are twin crises in the world today, the crisis of climate change, but also the crisis of biodiversity and nature, and re.green is positioned to address both through our nature-based solutions. And the market is already responding to that, providing bonus for biodiversity and other aspects of ecosystem services, and that will probably mature in a much bigger way. And in that sense, Brazil is uniquely positioned as the country that hosts the largest biodiversity in the world and more terrestrial carbon than any other country. It is also the country, according to our previous research, that has most areas in the top global priority areas for restoration. So we hope by leveraging the national potential, this time towards the restoration of nature, is something that re.green can contribute with a direct impact in multiple challenges and also helping Brazil to realize its potential to become a global leader in the sustainability space.
Okay, so restoring 1 million hectares, capturing 15 million tons of CO2 and returning forests to society as conservation units. Those are ambitious goals. Tell us a bit about the importance of this goal in achieving re.green's purpose.
Those are definitely ambitious goals, but they're goals we believe they are now feasible. I think over the last very few years, human society in general has increasingly recognized the severity of the situations we are facing regarding climate change, regarding biodiversity loss, regarding the multiple impacts that losing nature has had and will have in our lives. So 1 million hectare is ambitious, but it's commensurable to the scale of the challenges we face. So we need to act now. The emergency, the climate emergency, the nature emergency cannot stop anymore. The climate emergency, the biodiversity emergency means we have no time to lose. 1 million hectares when we started developing was actually the size of a restoration project that you would need to achieve to be visible with a naked eye from the moon. That's literally how ambitious we started to think about the problem we need to develop. But Brazil's national restoration plan is 12 million hectares. So again, Brazil has the potential, and we do hope that through re.green will also serve as an example to others that will help to complement this effort, so we can make sure that Brazil is offering its appropriate contribution to the severity of the global challenges. We are now in the United Nations decade on ecosystem restoration, and we hope that the restoration generation, as it's being called by the United Nations, will be the first one that will leave an environment, a planet, in a better state than we received.
How amazing it is, right, to see re.green and Brazil leading this type of solution. So I want to thank you, Thiago, Bernardo, so much. And we see each other in another opportunity, another re.green Talks.